My son threw hot coffee on my face because I asked for rice. I stayed silent and walked away. The next day, I froze his accounts, canceled his payments, and sent a notice. You have 48 hours to leave my house. I'm Goldie Ali, a 67-year-old widow from South Boston. The pen felt heavier than I remembered. I watched it glide across the last page of the contract, the ink settling into the paper like the final note of a song I had been playing for 40 years. O'Malley's Pub, the old bar my late husband and I built with our bare hands, was no longer mine. The mahogany counter still bore faint scratches from generations of laughter and spilled beer and late-night confessions. The smell of polish and whiskey lingered in the air, a scent that had once meant home. I looked around one last time. The bar stools were upside down. The neon sign flickered weakly above the mirror, and in the silence, I could almost hear my husband's laugh echoing from the back room. When I handed over the keys, the young realtor smiled and said, "Congratulations on your retirement, Mrs. O'Malley." Retirement. The word didn't feel real. I had spent most of my life working 7 days a week, raising a son while pouring drinks for men who could never hold their liquor or their promises. But I wasn't poor anymore. The sale of the pub had made me a wealthy woman comfortable for the first time in my life. Still, as I stepped into the chilly Boston air, I felt something hollow in my chest. I told myself it was freedom. Deep down, I knew it was loss. A week later, Sean and Ashley invited me to dinner at their condo in Back Bay. The place was as small as it was spotless, every corner curated for show. Ashley's candles smelled like lemon and eucalyptus, the kind of scent that made me nervous to breathe too deeply. Sean was in his usual work attire, pressed white shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled up just enough to look casual. "Mom," he began, his tone practiced, "we've been thinking about something big. A forever home." Ashley smiled, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "It's in Wellesley," she said. $2 million, but it's perfect. Great schools, beautiful community, and there's an in-law suite over the garage. You'd love it." I took a sip of the wine. She'd poured too dry for my taste and waited for the real ask. Sean leaned forward. "Mom, it's not just a house. It's an image. It's where the partners live. I'm next in line, but the bank won't give us the full loan. With your help, we'd be set for life." I looked at my son, the same boy who used to help me stack chairs after closing, and I heard something new in his voice. Ambition. Sharp and hungry. "Sean," I said slowly, "I don't give handouts. I make investments." Ashley's smile faltered. "Of course," she said lightly. "It's not charity. You'd have your own space. You'd be near the grandkids. It's a family thing." That word family hit me the wrong way. It had become something decorative in their mouths, like the throw pillows Ashley bought that no one was allowed to touch. I smiled anyway. "Let me think about it." I said 2 weeks later the papers were signed, not the ones they expected. I formed a limited liability company, Sui Properties LLC, and used it to purchase the Wellesley house in cash. The deed carried only one name, mine. When I told Sean, his eyebrows shot up. "You're serious about this LLC thing?" "I am." I said, "If I'm paying, I'm the owner." "You'll bet, Nance. You can handle the lease." He looked offended. "Mom, it's us. You don't need a lease." I smiled. "You're the lawyer. You know better. Make it fair." Annoyed and too busy to argue, he agreed. That night, I imagined him in his office downtown, scrolling through his firm's server, pulling a template without reading the fine print. He probably thought he was humoring me. I could picture him muttering, "It's just Mom. She won't even read it." When he handed me the lease, it was 30 pages of legal jargon and arrogance bound in a neat packet. I signed my name on every page. The rent was $1 a month. He and Ashley signed too, proud and oblivious. The day we moved in, the Wellesley house gleamed like a magazine spread. The white marble counters, the massive glass staircase, the minimalist furniture, everything screamed perfection. My in-law suite sat above the garage, a pristine little box with no warmth. It was meant for show, not living. I unpacked my few boxes' insolence and looked out the window. Across the manicured lawn, I saw Ashley arranging flowers in crystal vases while Sean gave instructions to movers like a general leading troops. By dinner time, they were already treating me like hired help. "Goldie," Ashley called sweetly. "If you could avoid using the main kitchen, that would be great. I just had the quartz resealed and it stains easily." Inaudid, biting back the words that wanted to come. In the next days, I found myself cooking for the kids, cleaning up after their messes, and paying the bills they barely noticed. I had agreed to cover utilities and the children's private school tuition until they settled in. What I hadn't agreed to was the coldness, the looks, the small humiliations. Liam and Olivia walked past me without a word, faces glued to their iPads, their silence a mirror of their parents. At night, I heard laughter from the living room, Ashley's high-pitched giggle, Sean's deep, confident voice. I sat upstairs alone, listening to the hum of the heater and the faint echo of my own heartbeat. Sometimes I walked through the empty streets of Wellesley, where every house looked the same, and no one said hello. I thought about the old bar, the sound of the jukebox, the warmth of regulars who called me, Maher, I was invisible. One evening I overheard Ashley on the phone with a friend. "She's sweet, but a little rough around the edges. South Boston never really leaves you, does it?" Her voice was dripping with laughter. I went back to my suite and closed the door. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I had done the right thing, helping my son secure a better life. Butas. I looked around the sterile little apartment above the garage. I realized something had shifted. I had given them a house, but somewhere in the process I had lost my home. The rain came down in cold, slanted sheets, drumming against the kitchen windows like impatient fingers. The air inside the Wellesley house was so sterile, it almost smelled like metal. I stood at the sink, my hands raw from scrubbing the garage earlier that day. The 3-car shrine to Sean's status had rire of oil and mildew. Ashley had handed me a bucket and gloves that morning and said with a bright smile, "You don't mind doing this, right?" The cleaning service missed last week. I hadn't said no. I rarely did. By the time I finished, my back was aching and I had skipped lunch. I wanted something, anything warm and real to eat. Dinner was served at 6 sharp as always. The table was set, perfectly of course, white linen napkins, matte black plates, and a salad so small it looked like a decoration. Ashley had plated seared salmon on cull leaves with the precision of a surgeon. "Keto night," she announced as though it were a national holiday. I smiled politely and took my seat at the far end of the table, across from Liam and Olivia, who were half watching their tablets under the table, their faces glowing blue in the dim light. The first bite of salmon vanished in seconds. It tasted fine, but there was so little of it. My stomach tightened, reminding me how long it had been since breakfast. I took small, careful bites of kale, pretending it was enough, but the ache in my stomach grew louder than my thoughts. I glanced toward the counter, imagining a pot of rice steaming there. Just the smell of it, simple, comforting. When the plates were nearly clean, I cleared my throat. "Ashley," I said softly, "that was lovely, dear, but I'm still feeling a bit empty. It's so cold tonight. Do you think I could make a small bowl of rice? Just a little." To warm me up, Ashley froze with her fork halfway to her mouth, then gave a laugh so sharp it sliced the air. "Rice? Oh God, no, Goldie. We don't keep white carbs in this house. Do you know what that does to your glycemic index?" I tried to smile, to keep the peace. "I don't mind cooking it myself. Just something warm. I've had a long day." She rolled her eyes, turning toward the kids. "See, this is what happens when you grow up on pub food. It's all starch and salt. Not healthy." Liam giggled. Olivia whispered something that made them both laugh. My cheeks burned. The sound of the front door slamming made us all jump. Sean's voice came first, low and bitter. Traffic was hell. He walked in, dripping rain on the tile floor. His suit rumpled, his expression tight. He moved straight to the espresso machine, muttering under his breath. I could feel the tension roll off him. The machine hissed and gurgled as he poured himself a shot of espresso, so dark it looked like tar. Ashley, sensing the danger, spoke quickly. "Rough day, honey." He didn't answer. Then, as he raised the tiny cup to his lips, he caught the last word of our earlier exchange. Rice. His eyes flicked toward me. Rice. Is that what this is about? I swallowed hard. I'm not complaining, Sean. He cut me off, his voice rising. For God's sake, Mom, can't you just be grateful? You have a roof over your head, food on your plate, everything paid for. And you're still asking for more? I blinked, taken aback. I'm not asking for more. I cleaned the garage all day, skipped lunch, and I'm just hungry. That's all? He set down the espresso cup a little too hard, the sound ringing through the marble kitchen. Unbelievable. Zoo, he muttered. You think you can just... He stopped, jaw tightening, then in one violent motion. He grabbed the tiny cup again. You want something hot? He snapped. You're always cold. Right here, before I could move, he threw it. The cup flew across the counter and shattered at my feet. The scalding espresso splashed across my hand and the front of my sweater. I gasped instinctively, clutching my wrist. The burn seared through my skin like fire. The smell of coffee filled the air, bitter and acid. Sean, I cried out, voice breaking. You burned me. Liam looked up from his tablet, eyes wide. Olivia glanced at her father, then back at the screen as though nothing had happened. Sean stood there, chest heaving, his face twisted with anger. You're overreacting, he said coldly. It's just coffee. It's not just coffee, I said, trembling. I'm your mother. He stepped forward, pointing at me, his voice cracking with fury. And you're a guest. Do you understand that? You are living in my house, eating my food for free. If you don't like it, you can get out. The words hung there, sharp and final. For a moment, the only sound was the steady drip of espresso from the counter. Something inside me went quiet. The pain from the burn dulled beneath a different kind of heat, a cold, steady realization. I looked at the man in front of me, my son, the child I had raised through late nights and double shifts, and I saw nothing of him left, just arrogance, entitlement, and a stranger wearing his face. I straightened, still shaking, but silent. I didn't shout back. I didn't cry. I simply looked at him, then at Ashley, who was frozen in the corner, her hand over her mouth, pretending to be shocked, but not moving to help. I turned to the sink, ran cold water over my burned hand, and watched the skin reen and tighten. Then I dried it with a towel, folded it neatly, and walked toward the door. Sean's voice followed me, still full of venom. You can't just walk away. Mom, don't you dare pull that silent treatment again. I didn't answer. The marble floor was slick under my shoes as I crossed it. I walked past the children, past Ashley's wide eyes, past Sean's disbelief, and up the stairs to my suite, above the garage. Inside, I locked the door and stood for a long time, listening to the rain batter the windows. My hand throbbed, but the pain was distant now. What filled me instead was something calm, steady, and cold. The woman they had humiliated, pied, and taken for granted was gone. The mother who once made excuses for her son's temper no longer existed. In her place stood someone else entirely, Mrs. Goldie Alley, proprietor of Sui Properties, LC, and for the first time in a long while, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I stood at the sink, the sound of running water filling the small suite like static. My hand stung beneath the stream, red and blistering where the espresso had hit. The pain should have made me cry, but I didn't. Not a single tear fell. My heartbeat had slowed, my thoughts sharpening with every second. The woman they thought they could humiliate, the weak, sentimental mother, was gone. What stood in her place was someone colder, someone older, and infinitely more dangerous. I dried my hand with a towel and laid it flat on the counter. The burn glowed angry and pink under the soft light. I took out my phone and snapped 3 photos. One close, one wide, one with the clock in frame. I'd learned long ago in business that proof was power, and tonight I had both pain and evidence. Sleep never came. I lay in bed listening to the rain die out and the silence of the house settle around me. Somewhere below, air refrigerator hummed. In another room, the kids' tablets buzzed with notifications. But in my mind, everything was still. I was already building the plan, piece by piece, like a blueprint for justice. At dawn, I brewed my own cup of coffee decaf out of irony and sat by the window. The gray sky was just beginning to brighten when I reached for the phone. The first call was to the bank. "Good morning. This is Goldie Ali," I said, keeping my tone steady. "I need to halt all automatic payments from my personal account. Effective immediately." The woman on the other end hesitated. "All of them?" "Ma'am, yes," I said. "That includes the utilities for the Wellesley property, the payments to Wellesley Hills Golf Club, and St. Mark's Academy." There was a pause. "Understood, Mrs. O'Malley. The changes will take effect within the hour." "Perfect," I said. "And please mark the accounts as restricted. No joint authorizations. No exceptions." When the call ended, I took a deep breath and made the second one. "Davidson Law," a groggy voice answered. "David, it's Goldie," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I need a favor. Pull the file for Sui Properties LLC, specifically the lease agreement for the Wellesley property, the one my son drafted." There was the sound of rustling papers. "Goldie, it's barely 6. What's going on?" I leaned back in the chair, watching a bird land on the wet railing outside. "He assaulted me last night." He said simply, threw hot coffee on me. "I want him out." There was silence. Then David's voice softened. "Jesus, Goldie, are you hurt?" "I've got burns," I said, "but I'll live. I need you to check Section 7, Clause C." I could hear him flipping pages. Then a low whistle. "My God," he said. "He's an idiot." He used the firm's commercial eviction template, what we call the scorched earth lease. Section 7, Clause C. Physical assault or threat of violence against the landlord constitutes an incurable breach. Italos for an unconditional 72-hour notice to quit. I smiled faintly. It thought so. I took photos of the burns as evidence. "Send the process server this morning. I'll be out of the house by noon." He hesitated. "Goldie, are you sure about this?" "I've never been sure of anything." I said it's time he learned the law he thinks he owns. By 8, I had packed a small suitcase, just clothes, my laptop, and the deed papers for Sui Properties. Downstairs, I could hear movement, Ashley's slippers shuffling across the tile, the smell of perfume already thick in the air. By mid-morning, they thought I was sulking. Sean hadn't even knocked on my door. He never did, unless he needed something. I imagined him sitting at the counter with his laptop open, half listening to Ashley complain about the Wi-Fi speed. They probably thought the quiet was my apology. The first sign came just after 10:01 from downstairs. I heard Ashley's voice rise. "That's impossible. Try it again." Another pause. Sharper this time. "Declined." "What do you mean declined?" I took another sip of coffee, savoring the sound. A few minutes later came the kids' cries. "Dad, the Wi-Fi is gone." Liam's voice was high and desperate, the way children sound when their tiny kingdoms collapse. "Relax, Bran," Sean muttered. "It's just a glitch." But I could already hear the irritation building in his tone. Then the phone rang. I didn't have to listen to know what it was, but the fury in Sean's voice confirmed it. "What do you mean the tuition payment was rejected?" "No, there's no mistake, check again." "The account's fine." It wasn't. I looked down at my bandaged hand and smiled without warmth. Every bill, every luxury, every privilege they had taken for granted wasted to me, to my name, my accounts, my generosity. And now all of it was gone. By 11, I could hear them pacing downstairs, their voices overlapping in panic. Ashley's tone was shrill. Sean's was clipped and defensive. The house that once echoed with their arrogance now buzzed with confusion. I zipped my suitcase and stood, my reflection faint in the window. The rain had stopped completely. Outside the world was clean, washed. "Let them wonder," I murmured. "Let them sweat. Because before the sun set, they'd learned something. My late husband used to say when he was still behind that mahogany bar back in South Boston, 'Never bite the hand that pays the bills.'" The sound of the doorbell cut through the chaos like a blade. I was upstairs in my suite, listening to the muffled shouting below, the kind of frantic, ugly noise that comes when panic begins to set in. Sean was still on the phone with the school, his voice cracking with frustration. Ashley was pacing, calling credit card companies, her tone wobbling between anger and tears. I could picture it perfectly without seeing a thing. The perfect marble kitchen now cluttered with bills, empty wine glasses, and themes of their unraveling lives. Then came the knock-sharp official, the kind of knock that doesn't wait for permission. From my window, I saw a man in a dark suit standing at the door, his coat damp from the morning drizzle. Sean answered, still clutching his phone. "Shah Ali," the man asked. Sean nodded. Distracted, the man handed him a thick envelope and said simply, "You've been served." Then he turned and walked away. Sean stood frozen in the doorway, the envelope in his hands. For a moment he looked like a little boy holding something too heavy to carry. Then he tore it open, expecting a case file, maybe a client complaint. I could almost hear the paper rip from upstairs. The pause that followed was delicious silence, heavy and total. Then faintly his voice, "Sui Properties LLC." I knew the exact moment the words sank in. His footsteps thundered up the stairs, Ashley right behind him. Both of them shouting my name. "Mom, open this door. What is this? What did you do?" I took my time unlocking it. When I opened the door, I was already dressed in a navy blazer, my suitcase packed and upright beside me. The look on Sean's face was almost worth everything he'd done. His skin had gone pale, his tie askew, his eyes darting between me and the envelope like a man trying to wake from a bad dream. He held up the paper shaking. "This is insane. 72 hours. You can't do that. It's illegal. I'm a lawyer. Mom, I know the law. It's a 30-day notice, minimum." I met his eyes calm and cold. "You're a lawyer," I said. "So read." I handed him a copy of his own lease. His own signature stared back at him from the first page. "You drafted it. Section 7, Clause C. The clause you were too lazy and arrogant to read yourself." His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I raised my bandaged hand. "The gauze now pale brown from the healing burn. You defined assault on the landlord as an incurable breach." I continued, my voice steady. "It grants the landlord the right to terminate the lease with an unconditional 72-hour notice to quit. Congratulations, counselor. You played yourself." Ashley started crying, soft at first, then louder. "But 72 hours, we have nowhere to go. The kids, what are we supposed to tell them? We don't have that kind of money." I turned to her, every ounce of pity long gone. "You had money," I said. "You both did. You had salaries, good ones. But you spent it all on cars, on vacations, on handbags that cost more than most people's rent. You lived like royalty because you thought my bank account was your safety net. Now the net's gone." Sean slammed the lease onto the wall, his voice cracking. "This isn't how family treats family." I looked at him, unflinching. "Family doesn't burn their mother's hand because she asked for rice." He flinched for a second. Something human flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by pride and disbelief. "You can't be serious about this," he whispered. I checked my watch. "You were served at 9:04 this morning," I said. "That gives you until 9:05 on Sunday. The sheriff will be here to remove you if you're not gone. I suggest you start packing." Ashley clutched Sean's arm, shaking. "Sean, please do something." He sank into the hallway chair, staring at the lease like it was written in another language. "I can't," he muttered. "It's airtight." The house was so quiet that even the hum of the refrigerator felt loud. I could hear my own breathing, steady and slow. I wanted to feel sad. I wanted some part of me to hesitate, but there was nothing left. They had drained it all. I reached for my suitcase handle and rolled it toward the stairs. Ashley's sobs followed me. Sean didn't move. At the top of the staircase, I stopped and looked back one last time. "Tell Liam and Olivia their grandmother wishes them well," I said. "And you might want to call the school. They'll need to transfer." I descended the stairs slowly, my heels tapping against the marble. Every sound echoed, sharp and final. The front door loomed ahead, the same one I had entered with hope and left so many times in silence. This time it would be different. When I stepped outside, the taxi was already waiting at the curb, engine humming softly in the cool morning air. The driver nodded, opening the trunk behind me. Through the wide glass windows, I saw Sean and Ashley standing together, small and colorless against all that white marble. I didn't wave. I didn't look back again. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, the mansion shrank in the rearview mirror until it was nothing but a shadow behind the rain-streaked glass, an empty house for people who never understood what home really meant. The months that followed felt like watching a storm from the calm side of the window. I never once called Sean or Ashley, and they never called me. But word travels fast in Boston from old friends. I heard bits and pieces, whispers carried through the grapevine of a family learning how hard life can be without a safety net. Their world fell apart quickly. No one wanted to rent to a family with a 72-hour eviction on their record. Even Sean's colleagues at the firm had heard the story. The proud associate with the perfect suburban home was now the lawyer who got thrown out by his own mother. They ended up in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Quincy, the kind of place where the walls are thin and the neighbors fight through them. Ashley, who used to spend her afternoons at boutique openings, took a job at a furniture store off Route 9. Sean worked longer hours than ever, chasing billable time just to keep the lights on. Their children, Liam and Olivia, now went to public school. The uniforms didn't fit right, and the cafeteria food wasn't what they were used to. The entitlement that had once come so easily to them began to crumble under the weight of reality. 6 months passed before I saw any of them again, but sometimes late at night, I imagined what their evenings must have looked like. The glossy marble kitchen replaced by laminate counters, the fancy espresso machine replaced by a dented kettle, the silence between them thick enough to choke on. One night Sean came home late past midnight. Someone told me later the rain had followed him inside. He found Ashley asleep at the kitchen table, her head resting on her folded arms. In front of her sat an empty bowl of instant rice. The kids were asleep in the next room. The apartment was dim and smelled faintly of damp carpet and cheap detergent. He stood there for a long time, looking at what his life had become. The peeling paint, the second-hand couch, the sound of pipes groaning through the walls, then like a film reel snapping into focus. I imagine he remembered that night in the Wellesley kitchen, the cold marble, the sharp light, and me standing small and tired, just asking for a bowl of rice. He remembered the way he had shouted, the way he had thrown that cup. And in that moment, it must have hit him the weight of what I had given and what he had destroyed. I like to think he sat down then and cried for the first time in years. While they struggled, I started over. I sold the Wellesley house the same week the eviction cleared. Every cent went into something that mattered, something that was mine. I reopened Alley's in South Boston, but this time it was smaller, warmer, and simpler. The new O'Malley's had a single long bar, mismatched stools, and a chalkboard menu. The air smelled of stew, bread, and beer. The regulars came back one by one, old faces that hadn't changed much. And when they raised a glass, they still called me Ma Ali. I felt alive again. I wasn't a landlord or a retiree. I was home. It was a slow Wednesday evening when the bell above the pub door jingled, pulling me from behind the bar. I looked up and there they were, Sean and Ashley. They looked smaller than I remembered, thinner, humbled. Their clothes were simple, their eyes tired. For a moment they just stood in the doorway like they weren't sure they belonged there. Sean was the first to speak. His voice cracked on the single word, Mom. Ashley's tears came before her voice did. Goldie, we're so sorry for everything. You were right. We were monsters. I didn't rush to answer. I studied them the way a doctor studies an old wound, searching for infection, for signs of healing. The anger that once lived in me had burned itself out. What remained was something quieter, an ache that no apology could erase. I set down the glass I'd been polishing and wiped my hands on a towel. Then I walked to the kitchen and came back with 2 steaming bowls of beef stew and thick crusts of bread. I placed them on the counter between us. Sit, I said. Eat. They obeyed without hesitation, spooning the food into their mouths like people who hadn't eaten in days. For a long time, none of us spoke. The clink of spoons and the hum of conversation from the other end of the bar filled the silence. When the bowls were half empty, I said quietly, "It's Wednesday. Truck delivery comes tomorrow. The walk-in fridge is a mess." Sean looked up, stew on his chin. "I can do that, Mom. I can come after work. I'll scrub it out." Ashley nodded, tears welling again. "And I can bus tables on the weekend if you'll have me." I looked at them both for a long moment. Their faces, their hands, their shame. Then I nodded once. "Grab an apron," I said. "We can start with that." And just like that, the noise of the pub seemed to soften around us. The lights felt warmer. They weren't tenants anymore. They weren't enemies. They were my family, sitting in the place where it had all begun, finally learning how to start over. Thank you for listening to this episode of Grandma Stories. Gold Ali went through a painful but powerful journey from betrayal and humiliation to justice and healing. Her story reminds us that self-respect and boundaries are worth more than any luxury home. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment, and explore more of our most touching and powerful grandma revenge stories on our page. We'd love to hear your thoughts and similar stories in the comments below.